Back in 1977, Jacques Cousteau extended me a personal invitation to participate in a classified expedition, one that would never appear in any official records or public acknowledgement. Our mission had nothing to do with coral research. Instead, we descended into an unmapped trench that produced sonar readings resembling respiratory patterns. What we discovered, there were ruins. Enormous black constructions predating all documented civilization, covered in symbols that couldn't have originated from human hands. One of these structures seemed to observe me directly, and from that instant forward, I understood that something had been roused from sleep. The pressure building inside my ears remains more vivid in my memory than the surrounding silence. The distinctive compression within your skull that occurs when you've gone too deep, descended too quickly. Yet even that recognizable discomfort failed to divert my attention from what I witnessed, or believed I witnessed, emerging through the sonar interference like some cathedral designed for beings that don't require oxygen. The situation began well before our departure from shore. My invitation arrived as a single-page memorandum. No official letterhead appeared on it. No signature authenticated it. Just coordinates, a specified time, and a message scrawled at the bottom by hand. You're not being asked, you're being chosen. The messenger who brought it departed without waiting for any response. 7 days later, I found myself aboard the Calypso's deck. Not a single mention of this in any newspaper. No film crew accompanied us this time. Only a minimal team and Cousteau himself, appearing more exhausted than my previous memories of him. His smile never touched his eyes. During that summer, he spoke less frequently. Something heavy and unspoken had subdued his famous warmth. We hadn't come here for coral reefs or sunken galleons. We'd come to search for something he refused to identify. Our destination was a deep trench located several hundred miles beyond the Azores coast. The bathymetric charts revealed minimal information, just a precipitous descent and what appeared to be a shelf at the bottom, oddly symmetrical in form. Cousteau referred to it as the anomaly. He'd visited it once before during 1963, during a mission that never entered the archives. During dinner on our first evening, I questioned him about it. He simply gazed at his wine glass for an extended moment before responding. It's older than the water that covers it. The initial dive seemed routine enough, at least according to the documentation. We deployed the mini-sub early under clear morning skies. 3 of us boarded, myself, Sonia, who handled our sonar technology, and Enrique, responsible for navigation. As we descended through the blue, the recognizable patterns of marine life surrendered to blackness. Not merely dark, void-like. We arrived at the shelf after 40 minutes. That's when our equipment began exhibiting strange behavior. Depth gauges continuously reset themselves. Sonia struck the monitor 3 times forcefully before it ceased flashing. 0 me. We'd reached nearly 12,000 feet down. Communications crackled with interference, but it wasn't simply noise. Beneath the hiss existed patterns, rhythms, as though someone or something attempted speech but couldn't construct words. Then our lights illuminated it. Initially, I mistook it for a reef. Jagged spires ascending from the ocean floor like vertebrae from some primordial beast. But as we drifted nearer, it became evident they were too regular, too precise. Rectilinear angles, sharp symmetry, and what resembled inscriptions carved in a black stone that shimmered like oil under pressure. Sonia froze. Did you say this was volcanic? It's not. I answered, though my throat had gone dry. At least not naturally. We circled one of the spires. The closer our approach, the worse our readings became. Temperature spikes, pressure fluctuations. Our onboard systems simultaneously believed we were surfacing and imploding. Sonia captured photographs while Enrique adjusted our heading. As we pivoted to scan the adjacent structure, something large moved between our lights and the spires, just for an instant. A ripple through the darkness, like watching a shadow retreat behind a wall. I asked Enrique whether he'd seen it. He nodded but offered no words. Upon surfacing, Cousteau was already present. He didn't inquire about our discoveries. He only asked whether we brought anything back. We hadn't, but he appeared relieved rather than disappointed. That evening, I overheard him arguing in hushed French with one of the engineers. I caught only fragments, not ready, keeps growing, and something that chilled my blood. ILS Savant. It remembers. The following morning, one of our backup divers resigned without explanation. Didn't even collect his equipment. Simply stood on the deck at dawn, pale as chalk, muttering. I heard it breathing. I reviewed our audio recordings privately. It wasn't just interference. Low, rhythmic pulses existed in the background, like a heartbeat, stretched thin and deep. I filtered the wavelengths. The signal wasn't originating from our submersible. It was emanating from beneath the spires. I attempted to raise this during briefing, but Cousteau interrupted me. No speculation, he stated. Only data. But his hands trembled as he spoke. That night, after everyone had gone below deck, I stood alone at the stern. The sea was absolutely calm. No wind, no waves, just that unsettling stillness you occasionally experience before a storm or something worse. I looked down into the black water and observed lights far below. They weren't ours, and that's when I noticed they were arranged in a pattern, a perfect circle. Then they extinguished one by one in a sequence I couldn't forget. Morse code, repeating, 6 short, 1 long. It was a signal I knew from naval training years ago. Dive, dive, dive. And I swear I heard something whisper it back. Initially, I believed the structure had shifted position. We were examining sonar scans from the previous dive, and the spires, those rising like black fangs from the ocean floor, appeared in a different location than before. Not drifted, relocated, moved. Sonia dismissed it as a positioning system glitch, attributed it to the depth sensors, but I knew otherwise. These readings weren't merely misaligned. They revealed something else. An entire new formation where nothing but flat sediment had existed days earlier. And then we discovered the second symbol. It was carved into a stone block retrieved by one of the submersible's external arms. At first glance, it appeared purely geometric, a ring of dots surrounding a crude eye. But when we rotated it beneath the lab lights, you could observe indentations like braille spiraling inward. We processed the surface through image enhancement software. The spiral wasn't decorative. It was text. Ancient perhaps, but organized, structured, repetitive. And that same phrase kept appearing in the translation records. Below, flesh, above silence. The deeper our analysis went, the more the crew fragmented. Enrique became obsessed. He ceased sleeping, isolated himself on the lower deck with printouts of the carvings taped across the walls. Claimed he'd seen the symbol before. Not here at home. In a sketchbook his sister left behind when she vanished in '74. A drawing nearly identical to the stone's etching. None of us believed him initially, but then he showed us the sketch, and there it was, accurate down to the last curve. A detail too precise for coincidence. That's when Cousteau sealed the lab. No one in or out without authorization. Said it was to prevent contamination, but the way he kept his hand near his coat pocket, where he always kept the artifact, I knew it wasn't about the stone. He was concealing something. That night, I discovered what. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept circling that phrase, below flesh. It felt like a warning, or perhaps an invitation. I rose and crept into the control room, intending to review the audio from our second descent. But the reel was missing. In its place was a labeled cassette. March 12th, classified. Do not duplicate. I played it. What emerged wasn't our dive audio. It was older. The hiss of analog tape, faint sonar clicks, then voices, garbled, layered but human. French mostly. And in the background, something else. Not a voice. A sound, a pattern, like breathing, deep, guttural, slow enough to be mistaken for machinery until it changed rhythm, reacting to the divers' voices, matching them. One of the voices screamed. Then the tape cut. I confronted Cousteau the next morning, asked him about the recording's origin. He didn't flinch, just met my eyes and said, they knew what was down there before any of us. When I asked who they were, he handed me a waterlogged binder with U.S. Navy markings and a seal stamped over the cover. Operation Diomede. Inside were pages of sonar readouts, hand-sketched diagrams of the ruins, and a set of typed transcripts redacted so heavily they were nearly illegible. Except for one line. The entity exhibits signs of directed perception. Directed perception. It saw them. And now it saw us. Enrique went missing the following night. We searched the ship top to bottom. His personal effects remained untouched. His bunk made, clothes folded, but his dive log had disappeared. And on the glass panel above his station, someone had scratched the spiral into the condensation with their finger. It hadn't been there an hour earlier. None of us spoke about it, but we all witnessed it. That afternoon, we launched the probe again, a last-ditch attempt to verify the shifting architecture. But what it captured defied logic. The terrain below had reshaped entirely. What had once been a flat basin was now concave, descending in impossible tiers like steps spiraling downward into the dark. At the center was a void, not just shadow, absence. Sonia enhanced the image, adjusted the contrast. The black wasn't seafloor. It was open, and something inside reflected our light back, distorted, like watching your own face warp in a funhouse mirror, except the reflection smiled. The moment she paused the feed, every monitor on the ship went white. No static, no signal loss, just blank. Then one by one, each monitor began displaying symbols. Not scrolling, flashing sequences like a code. The eye, the spiral, the phrase below flesh, above silence. Over and over, we pulled the plug on the entire system. Killed the generator, but it didn't stop. The symbols kept flashing, this time on the walls in dripping black salt water. And I swear, just before the lights died, I heard someone whisper my name from inside the submersible. The walls were still wet. Not damp, not misted, dripping, as if we were underwater and no one had told us. I ran my hand down the corridor panel, just outside the lab, and my fingertips came back slick with brine. The salt stung my skin. No broken pipes, no burst valve, just salt water seeping through solid steel. The generator room was the first to fail. Then the aft deck lights blinked out one by one. Every few hours, a new system went dark, and no one could agree on why. Sabotage was whispered, but no one accused anyone aloud. Everyone was too afraid it wasn't one of us. We tried to restore power to the navigation array. Sonia was working on it when she let out a short scream. By the time I reached her, she was just standing there, pale and shaking, staring at the screen. The monitor had flickered back on, only for a second, but it had shown something. Something that looked like a shape made of shadow. Not like it had stepped in front of the camera, like it had been inside it. It looked like it was reaching out, she said, her voice barely audible over the emergency lights hum. Like it could see me. I wanted to tell her it was stress. The same way Cousteau kept trying to explain things away with science. Sonar bounce, light refraction, pressure hallucinations. But I couldn't lie. Not anymore. Not when I'd seen the black symbols etched onto the inside of my own bunk window. Etched from the other side of the glass. Enrique's journal surfaced the next day. We found it sealed inside a waterproof pouch under the galley's floor grate, somewhere no one should have been able to access without pulling up metal panels. The first half was his usual notes, dive logs, sonar readings, sleep schedules. But the second half descended into obsession. Pages and pages of the spiral drawn over and over, accompanied by looping, frantic scrawls. The eye beneath watches. The gate inside us opens. Then something else. Coordinates. Not where we've been diving, but deeper, off the known trench into a rift no one had mapped. I checked the sub's depth capacity. It couldn't survive that descent. But Cousteau had known. The classified folder hidden in his quarters held sketches, prototypes of a second submersible. Smaller, reinforced, one man only. No one on the crew knew it existed, but it was there, hidden beneath a false floor panel in the cargo bay. Untouched, prepped, waiting. When I confronted Cousteau, he didn't deny it. He only said one thing. If something wakes up hungry, do you not feed it something small so it won't eat the rest? I didn't understand until I opened the sub's logs. Test dives? Not from this mission, not even recent. Some dated back to the early 70s. Every entry marked partial success or subject retained. And one had a name I recognized from a crew roster. A diver listed as lost at sea. But he hadn't been lost. He'd been offered. I felt something crack in me then. Some quiet belief that we were explorers, researchers, that this was about science. That shattered completely. Cousteau wasn't here to study it. He was here to contain it. Or worse, appease it. The sub was gone by nightfall. Sonia vanished with it. She left no note, no logs. Only her headset resting carefully on her bunk and one last sonar sweep printed and pinned to the wall, highlighted in red. A new cavity forming below the ruins. A cavity that pulsed like a living thing drawing breath. At 3:12 a.m., every radio on the ship came alive. Not voices, not signals, just static. And behind it, deep rhythmic vibrations. A pattern, almost a word. Then one sound, a single low-frequency pulse that made my fillings ache. The sea outside the observation window began to glow. Not bright, just a faint bioluminescent shimmer, but it moved like a wave of light chasing itself through the water. And then I saw the silhouettes. Not fish, not anything I could name. They weren't swimming. They were climbing the water as if it were solid. I backed away, heart thundering. A voice inside me screamed to run, to hide. But where? There was nowhere left to go. The ship groaned. Something scraped along the underside, slow and deliberate, as if tracing the length of the hull. And then through the glass, one of them turned toward me. No face, just that eyes spiraled hollow, impossibly wide. And I understood. We hadn't found ruins. We had broken a seal. The glass didn't shatter. It melted. A slow ripple spread across the observation window like heat over ice, distorting the ocean outside into a nightmare of impossible colors. And then that I spiraled lidless, vast, pressed close. Not touching, but aware. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It wasn't looking at me. It was inside me, leafing through my thoughts like pages in a diary. The ship's hull groaned, not from pressure, but from something pulling on it, like the sea itself had wrapped around the vessel in fists of current and gravity. Somewhere above, alarms wailed. I could hear the panicked stomping of boots across steel. But down here in the dark, everything was silent except for my own heartbeat and the low humming from the artifact case. It was no longer sealed. The lid had been pried open. The black conical shape we'd found was gone. The power died again. Not a flicker, total blackout. And in that breathless void, I heard breathing. Not my own. The emergency lights blinked on dimly, casting blood-red hues across the corridor. I staggered toward the lab, half convinced I'd find nothing but flooding and wreckage. But what I found was worse. Cousteau stood in front of the sealed dive bay doors, his face streaked with sweat and salt. In his hands, he held the artifact. It pulsed faintly now like a heartbeat in stone. I told her not to take it, he said without turning. But it was already too late. It chose her the moment she touched the water. I asked where Sonia was. He shook his head. She's not gone. Not entirely. The ocean doesn't consume like fire. It rewrites. Behind the glass, the submersible was gone. In its place, something rose from the darkness below. I couldn't name it. There was no shape, just shifting lines, impossible geometry, reflections of things that couldn't exist under physical law. It looked like ruin, like memory, like something trying to remember what it once was before being sealed away. I saw it in '63, Cousteau muttered. That's when I first heard the call. We mapped the edge, nothing more. But even then, it knew me. It waited. He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw real fear behind his eyes. I thought if I fed it only the willing, it would stay buried. But it doesn't want blood. What does it want? I asked. Witnesses. The metal began to bend. Steel screamed around us. The corridor twisted under invisible force. My ears popped and bled. I stumbled back, hand on the wall, and saw the spiral symbol blooming across the steel in patches of corrosion and algae, spreading like infection. A klaxon blared, not from the ship, but from the sea itself. A sonar ping, deep and vibrating through my spine, echoed from every direction. Not from one source, but dozens. Whatever was down, there was no longer alone. I grabbed the only breathing mask I could find and ran. The emergency lift barely responded. When it opened, the hallway beyond was warped, as though pressure had twisted space into something else. I made it to the communications bay by memory, crawling through half-collapsed walkways and flickering red light. The radios were dead. All of them, except for one handheld set, hissing with static. And in that static, I heard my name. Not once. Over and over, like a chant, a low chorus. Male, female, inhuman. And underneath, a new phrase. You brought the key. Now unlock the mouth. There was no storm. The sea above us was glass. The crew that remained, 2 men and 1 woman I barely recognized through the panic, had barricaded the bridge. One of them tried to hail the mainland again. I told them it was useless, that they should focus on the depth readings. They were rising, not descending, rising. The trench itself was folding upward like a blooming flower. We didn't dive into it. It was coming up to meet us. I took the artifact and ran to the lab. I didn't know what I was going to do. Destroy it, maybe? Throw it back overboard. But when I held it again, something in my mind opened like a trapdoor. I saw a memory that didn't belong to me. A civilization older than the seafloor, watching stars form and die, their prayers etched into tectonic plates. And in that moment, I understood this wasn't a discovery. It was an awakening, and we were standing on its tongue. I don't remember getting to the surface. Just the taste of salt in my mouth and the awful pressure behind my eyes as the air thickened around me. I must have escaped. I must have pulled the emergency buoy, triggered the ascent protocol. But I have no memory of it. Only the echo of that voice still reverberating inside me, as if the artifact had rewired something fundamental in my mind. Not a voice exactly, a message, a knowing. They found me 2 days later, drifting unconscious in a lifeboat 20 miles from our last log coordinates. No sign of the Calypso, no wreckage, no distress signal. Just me, sunburnt, dehydrated, and clutching a black, barnacle-encrusted stone no one could remove from my grip without cutting into my palm. The official story was that the vessel suffered a catastrophic systems failure. The families were told it sank during a rogue seismic event. No bodies recovered, no interviews, just silence and signatures. I signed papers too. Confidentiality agreements, waivers, things that smelled of Pentagon ink and quiet threats. But I never stopped hearing it. That slow, rhythmic signal from the deep. A pulse behind my eyelids, a pattern in the shadows at night. I saw it in car headlights, in MRI scans, in the whirls of my own fingerprint. It was always there, just waiting. I spent years trying to forget. I moved inland, left marine work entirely, tried to live like the rest of them, tried to convince myself it was trauma, hallucination, survivor's guilt, that everything we found was buried with the ship. But late at night, when the world went quiet, I still heard the breathing. I tried to track down others from the mission, anyone who might have made it, but the crew files were sealed. Even my own notes had been tampered with. Pages missing, dates altered, photographs smudged or erased entirely. I wasn't just being silenced. I was being scrubbed. It wasn't until I found Enrique's sister. Yes, she existed, that the pieces started clicking back into place. She'd been institutionalized for years, thought dead, but she was alive in a private care facility under a false name, sketching spirals on the walls of her room with her fingernails. When I visited, she stared at me for a long time. Then she whispered, "It's awake, you know. We all are now." She handed me something, an envelope she said she'd been keeping for her brother. Inside were drawings, sonar maps, and a small cassette tape labeled only with a date, March 12th. The same tape Cousteau had shown me, or maybe a copy, but this version had an additional 30 seconds. At the end of the tape, after the static and breathing and layered voices, there was one last message. We are not the first. We are not the last. We are the echo. Those words burned into me. I played that tape over and over, but no one else could hear the final sentence. It was only there when I was alone, when the lights were low, when the world stilled enough to let the truth rise back to the surface. I knew then that what we awakened wasn't singular. It wasn't a god or a monster or an ancient machine. It was a layer, a membrane between what we understand and what waits underneath. Something we stepped through, or maybe something that stepped through us. The ocean hadn't hidden it. The ocean had been hiding us from it. And now, with the seal broken, the spiral doesn't stop. I see it in data sets from satellite sonar scans, in radio signals that get flagged and buried, in strange mass strandings along coastlines that were previously untouched. They call it environmental drift. I call it migration. The world still turns, and no one's listening. Not to the echoes, not to the signals, not to the people like me who whisper about things that don't fit neatly into categories. But every year, more disappear. Not in floods, not in crashes. They just vanish. Into water. Into silence. I've kept quiet for decades, but I'm done hiding. Maybe this message won't survive long. Maybe someone will delete it, redact it, scrub me clean again. But if even one person hears this, if you've ever seen the eye in your dreams or found yourself tracing spirals without meaning to, you already know something moved beneath the sea, and now it's moving beneath us.